Thanks for coming to this session today about, so what's the risk? My name is Tim McCreight. I'm the Acting Chief Security Officer for the City of Calgary, and it's my pleasure to attend the virtual session for B-Sides Calgary this year. I want to take a couple of minutes and go through the session itself, and I want to thank, also before I get going, I want to thank the organizing committee for putting together such a great format on Hopin. I really had a chance to listen to some of the sessions yesterday and just to duck in and out. Awesome presentations, such a terrific amount of talent that we have within the B-Sides Calgary community. So I want to thank you all for being part of this and taking time out of your day to listen to the sessions, listen to the expertise that all the speakers have. And I hope that all of us have a chance to take something out of the sessions that we've been sitting in on and bring it back to your workplace. So what I'm going to do now shortly is I'm going to drop off video so I can save some of the bandwidth in the house. And then I'm going to go through the presentation. As we see questions along the way, I've got folks helping me out. Thank you for that. And we're going to have a question and answer session at the end as well. So let me quickly drop off my video so I can keep the bandwidth rolling along here. And we'll start up our presentation. Just one sec. Great. Thanks, everyone. Let's carry on. I want to do a quick introduction of myself, the role I have, and some of the things that I've been fortunate to do in my career and how it relates to the topic about risk and presenting it to executives. I also want to talk a little bit about the risks themselves and that there's so much of it out there, things we can focus on and things that we worry about as information security professionals. Next up, let's talk about this whole presentation that you want to give now because you found something really bad. And I got to get people excited about it. I need people to see what's happening. I got to get people to look at the problems that we're dealing with. But when we look at that, let's also understand what the reaction is. And our next pivot is to focus on risk. I'm also going to give a couple of quick examples, things that I've done really well or that seem to have gone really well. And one particularly bad example of what happens when you don't take into account some of the things we're going to talk about during the session today. I'll open up for question and answers as well. And if you have questions throughout the session, please put them into the chat and I'll try to get to them near the end. And I've got some really wicked smart people helping me out who are going to guide me along and make sure I answer all the questions too. All right, so let's begin. Just put that out there for a couple of minutes. Yeah, it doesn't have the same impact that it does in person, but yeah, I am actually wearing pants. So I think that's a plus for me today. So I don't have the stretchy pants on. I've actually got the good pants on. So yeah, there is going to be personal opinion, so I am not representing the City of Calgary in this presentation. And occasionally, we are going to have some interesting language along the way. So let's take a look, and let's move past this and get into our first little bit. Introduction. Yeah, so I've been doing this for year 39 now. I started back in 1981, and I originally began my career as a security guard in a hotel in downtown Winnipeg, Manitoba. So I got out of the Air Force in 1981 and I desperately needed a job because I think my bar tab at the mess hall was far more than what it was making. So I picked up a job as a security officer in a hotel and then became the chief security officer as well. So for the past 39 years, I've held roles in both physical and cyber security. In the late 90s, I took myself out of the workforce for 2 years and went back to school in Edmonton at NAIT to take computer systems technology. And it wasn't because I wanted to program. It's because I wanted to understand how computer systems worked, how they could be broken, and then how could I work to protect those systems for clients and for organizations. So from early 2000 onward, my focus has been mostly on the cybersecurity aspect as the Chief Information Security Officer or an executive responsible for information security. So for me, it's an opportunity for me to start giving back, right? So I love dogs, and you can see my girl Hazel here sitting on the bed. Hazel is a rescue dog that I picked up from ARCS 2 years ago. And I fell in love with her and the idea of having a dog again to the point where I just bought a house to make sure that she had a home. So I'm sitting here in Hazel's house and she's outside the door listening to me give this presentation. I'm on the board of directors for ASAS International. It's the oldest security association in the globe. And it has, yeah, thanks, Derek. It is. ARCS is awesome. And Hazel's just a goofball. She's about 120 pounds. She came from a reserve. So she was they called them, she was the bait dog in a pit bull fighting ring. So when she was first rescued, she hated people, she wasn't supposed to be around anybody. She was a huge bite risk. But over time, with a lot of love, time, care, and attention, she's now probably the biggest goofball I've ever seen. She weighs more than Lisa, which is hilarious. So when she gets on the bed and doesn't move, yeah, that's it. She owns the bed. So That's our girl, Hazel. Back to ASIS. I've been on ASIS as a member since 1981. I'm now on the executive board for ASIS Global. So that means I'm responsible as an executive to steer the organization and grow the organization across the globe. I'm also the sponsor for enterprise security risk management globally. So it's my duty now to spread as much as I can the word of ESRM around the globe and help train security professionals about a focus of risk as opposed to this concept that we do security. And for me, this is a chance, particularly through the B-Sides organization and through others, is to give back. All the things and all the mistakes I've made, which are quite a few, it's a chance to learn from the things that I've done so you folks don't have to do the same thing. All right, enough about me and Hazel. Let's make sure we go on and carry on with our session here. So first up, this idea of there's so much risk. This whole idea that if there's a threat and you have an asset that's vulnerable to it and an opportunity for that vulnerability to be realized, now we're looking at a risk. So from that equation, there is so much of it now out there in the world and things that we need to be worried about as information security professionals. It's kind of hard to figure out where to start. But I know you folks, as you work through your day-to-day and some of the amazing sessions that you saw during B-Sides yesterday, that some deal with are getting more complex. And some of the impacts that these vulnerabilities, if they're realized, if it's exploited, and if that risk becomes real, the difference between organizations surviving and expiring is getting smaller and smaller. So we have to be, as security professionals, even more on our game when we're addressing the risks that are facing our organizations. But let's take a look at some of the ones that I've been looking at over the last year or so and see if they make sense to you folks as well. All right, targeted ransomware, absolutely. So we're seeing this more and more, and we're reading about it more and more in the news, at least for those organizations that want to talk about it publicly. But we do know that this concept of targeting ransomware to individuals within an organization is having huge payoffs for those who are on the other side of that line. And you can't blame them with the amount of work that it takes to put together a ransomware package and send it off to somebody with the potential benefits of what that brings to that criminal organization. It's amazing we're not seeing more of this coming through. Cloud jacking. Yeah, this is, awesome. That's not the right word to use. So from a security professional's perspective, to see change now to credentials in the cloud being jacked and being used to impersonate a user, it's something we didn't think about 10 years ago, but it's something now as a risk that we have to look at from an information security perspective. Working from home. Absolutely. I'm sitting here in my home office with my dogs outside the office, and I am now another risk vector for an organization. Just because I'm not sitting on that network, I don't have an opportunity to walk down the hallway and talk to somebody about, hey, should I click on this link? Or does this thing look fishy to you? No, now we're asking, thousands of workers, at least within my organization, thousands of workers who have never worked at home before, to actually be at home now and to manage the security of their organization's device on a home network. 10 years ago, would this have worked? Had this pandemic been here now, 10 years ago, would we have the same problems we're facing today? No, because we didn't have the technology. But now that we do, we're opening up more threat vectors into an organization for all of these workers sitting at home. Insecure code. Jesus, yeah, this never ends, right? This idea of creating an application development lifecycle and including security in it, pushing as far left as we can in the lifecycle of code. Some organizations, some coding teams are still struggling with that idea, or some are still facing so many hard deadlines to get something out the door that we're still looking at insecure code as one of the bigger reasons that we stay up at night. Social engineering. Yeah, this will never end. Human beings are always going to be looking at ways to take something from another human being. And the principles of social engineering make this such an easy opportunity to get into an organization, to gain knowledge about an organization, and then to use it against that organization. It's amazing that we haven't seen more of this, again, being advertised in the news or being in media. But it takes a certain skill set, and those criminal organizations or those individuals who are really good at this are seeing this as an amazing opportunity to get into an organization, expose the vulnerabilities, and then exfiltrate data or to take advantage of the organization in different ways. Users, yeah, wow. A user to me is still, don't get me wrong, we're here to help users. We're here to serve the user community, but holy smokes, the users are also some of our biggest problems. And it's because they are our first line of defense. And we rely so much on the users as they open an email, as they gain access to a piece of information, as they get into an application. We rely on users to be smart about this, to have some understanding of what security really is, and to apply some of the principles that we've probably been talking to them over the last X many years about the threats, the vulnerabilities, the risks, etc., that the cyber world faces. But the problem is, a typical user, and you folks know this, they have so many other things that they need to focus on during the day that we are probably one of the last things we focus on, unless you've made that cultural impact in your organization and security is top of mind for every user in every activity that they do. And I don't know of too many organizations who have got that focus right now. AI fuzzing and ML poisoning. Yeah, wow. These are so we've seen fuzzing before in the past, right? Where you've taken so many different opportunities to try to break into an application or different vectors to get into it. The advent of AI now and having that AI engine being available to the guys on the other side of the line makes that penetration or that opportunity to break into applications and systems and to find those vulnerabilities even more pronounced. And we're going to see more of this in the future as we start seeing some of the more open concept AI engines running out there and people using those toolkits to start probing, testing. We're going to see the launch of zero-day vulnerabilities coming faster now, just because of the advent of new technologies and what it brings to us in our environment from the positive side, but also on the negative side. Yeah, and the other one is ML poisoning. This is relatively new. As we looked at machine language and as it starts gaining a greater foothold in organizations and the reliance of machines to start looking at the different inputs that we have to make decisions, what if me, as the person on the other side of that line, took the opportunity to poison that training data pool for your ML engine? What if I was able to steer the direction that that ML engine is going to take now based on some of the changes, slight or subtle, inside the training data pool? Scary concept, right? Particularly when you're relying on that ML to do really, really important work for your organization or to respond to events that could have impacts to users, to citizens, to clients, or to people's safety. So for me, this stuff is getting really scary. And as we see more risk of this coming up, this is going to be difficult for us to present. We're going to talk about some of these examples when you get further into this presentation. Vulnerability management, this never goes away, right? We've been dealing with vulnerability management since the 90s, and we're still having problems managing this throughout an organization. And it still provides risks to any enterprise that has to deal with information systems, accessing cloud, and dealing with users. Mobile malware, yeah, we keep hearing it. 2019 was the year of mobile malware. 2020 is the year of mobile malware. It's always going to be the year of mobile malware, just because it's another entry point for those on that other side of the line to gain access to data, our personal or corporate data, and use it against us, or to capture those devices and use them for something else. Finally, phishing. Yeah, it's getting more and more, they're getting more sophisticated. We no longer have those old Nigerian style letters that came our way in phishing attacks. They're getting more complicated now. They're getting harder to detect now, and we're relying on our users to be more vigilant than ever. So again, I linked that whole phishing to the users. And these are risks that we're always going to face. And it's going to be more difficult for us now to identify it, to eradicate it, more importantly, to explain it to executives and the help that we're going to need. All right, let's move on. So let's say in the slide we just went through, one of those was a particular issue that you are very, very concerned about, that there's a credible threat to the organization, that this risk can be realized. So you have a threat. You have a vulnerability to an asset. There's an opportunity to compromise that asset. And there's a direct impact now to the asset itself, to the information that we're trying to protect, to the systems that you operate within your organization, or to the stakeholders that that organization serves. Whether they're in my example, citizens, or users within the organization, or clients who purchase, buy, or interact with your organization for the services you provide. So let's say you've gone through your theoretical exercise. You've conducted a detailed technical threat risk assessment. You're worried now because if we looked at some of the things on the screen past, one of those is really pressing, and this has to get presented up to the executives. Holy smokes, something really bad is happening, and I got to get this in front of somebody, and they got to know that this is wrong. Okay, awesome. All of those things are amazing. So as you start to collect your information for the presentation, as you build that binder of data that you believe you need to have to support your presentation, let's go through some of the steps that you may or may not have, or I'm going to use myself in one past example of the things that I tried to do to get ready for what I thought was an amazing technical presentation. First up, yeah, I did. I put on a suit and a tie. You bet. So now, sadly, I'm wearing glasses. Back in the day, I wasn't. But what I did do is I went through the steps I thought were really important from a technical perspective. And I'm going to use this one example. I'm going to date myself, so my apologies for this. But I am going to throw some kudos to an amazing who's on your B-Sides committee and is actually running or ran the Capture the Flag session yesterday. So years ago, I was working in an organization and responsible for the security for all of the information assets, including the telecom assets. We had this great project where we were going to start, again, I'm going to date myself, we were going to start implementing as an alternative to the typical bandwidth we provided to our clients. But more importantly, we're going to use this platform, this brand new platform, for this amazing project that we had just won, and it was going to have national prominence. Actually, it was global. So you can picture how excited the whole company was. All right, we go through this. We did this risk assessment. Identified, holy crap, you could actually intercept the conversations. They weren't encrypted, and you could play back the information, and you could actually hear what the line to. Wow. Sure, developed for this presentation. We collected a series of data. We went full technical. We even had a copy of the WAV file for the conversation. We had all of that, and that's what I had. This is what I was bringing to the table from a report perspective and from a presentation perspective. All right. So, for those who speak a language other than English, now you can realize, well, oh my God, from a Russian, Portuguese, Greek, and German perspective, this is, you can understand the context of where we're trying to go with some of this stuff because, yeah, we're in shit. Right? This could really hurt us. This is something your bone, pretty professional. This is really bad. So now you got to look at dealing with this. And now I'm going to get into this presentation. So you get into and I'm looking for that reaction, right? I am, and as I am, going to be uncovered, identified. Well, I need that this is really bad. This is something that if we don't get on this right now, this is crippling because I see the technical component. Know that this is right. My data and get into the talking about and these are my executive here to what I have, and this is what super frustrating. I was prepared for. As we all grow in the role in security, we need that ranks of determine that we know the presentation across or organization. Back up, not only identify is technically to your device, to your network. Let's not screw anything up. I'm just going to go right from here. So a couple of different things. Hang on. I started talking about this model that ASIS has built. And it's what I look at this from my perspective, this is something that really makes a lot of sense, because I'm going to start on the right-hand side of the diagram, then we're going to work into the center. So the first up is this idea that from my perspective as a security professional on the information side or the cyber side, I need to understand from the context of the organization, what's our mission and our vision, right? So these are things that we need to worry about as information security professionals and things we should be taking to heart for the organizations we work in. Once I understand the mission and vision, I need to focus on core values, or what does the business require of us as employees, but also what we require of the clients, and the users and the citizens of our services. We should understand the operating environment, whether we have regulatory or legislative requirements, privacy requirements. Do we deal with credit card data or personal information? Those things we need to know because that impacts the way that we operate as information security professionals. And finally, who are the stakeholders? So who from that organization look at us, require from us, or interact with us that have a stake in the organization itself? And it could be everything from those who buy our product, those who invest in our services, or those who request us to provide services to them. So on that right-hand side, that context, really important for us as security professionals to embrace and understand. On the bottom, this is how we operate within the security program. We need to look at risk from a holistic perspective. So that means that regardless of where that security risk is, it's our requirement to go find it, to go hunt for it, to look for those risks objectively and without impediment. We also need to make sure we develop partnerships with our stakeholders. That could be the IT department, it could be facilities management, it could be HR, legal counsel, etc. But we as security professionals need to step outside of our box with just that little realm of cybersecurity and understand who the partners are that we need to interact with on a daily basis. Transparency is important. Everything we do as information security professionals needs to be presented back in a transparent way. If we identify a risk or we identify a threat that could be exposed or a threat that could be realized in our environment, we need to be able to present that to executives so that they understand it. And finally, governance. There needs to be a structure over top of the work that we do to make sure that we as security professionals fall within the lines and are applying the same principles that we have for conducting ourselves within the organization and the operating environment of our company. Inside the circle itself, well, this is where it gets interesting. First up is identify and prioritize the assets that business needs to be successful. On the cyber side of the house, that could be everything from the network itself, the applications that run on it, the services we provide that are web-facing, the mobile apps that we've designed for our clients, etc. But we need to identify and prioritize those assets because those are the things that the organization needs to be successful every day. Once we have a really good understanding of what those assets are, our job now is to identify and prioritize the risks that we see to those assets. And we do that in a very collaborative fashion. This isn't something we just identify on a whiteboard and call it a day. We spend time with the clients. We have to spend, we'll do phone calls, interviews, workshops, etc., to really get to know the clients themselves, understand their business objectives, and what are those risks that are facing the assets. Next step. Once we identify what the risks are, well, now we got to find ways to mitigate those risks. That mitigation strategy is collaborative as well. It's something where we need to spend time with the clients, understand what's appropriate for them to put into place and what's practical as well. When we design and develop those mitigation strategies, it's our job to help the business unit present those to their executives, and it's the business's job to accept or understand what those risks are. So our job truly is let the business make the decision. Right? It's the business that's there. It's the business that sets the goals and objectives. It needs to be the business that's going to conduct those risks, accept that risk on behalf of the organization. It's not security's role to do that. That has to be done by the business. Finally, we have a continuous improvement cycle that we're always going to follow through. And those are things that we're going to worry about on a regular basis. So it's not just we don't just do one risk assessment and it's one and done. No, this needs to be continuous because it's our opportunity right now to take those recommendations, take those controls, take that acceptance, bring it back into our systems, and then continually monitor if we put a control into place, is it operating effectively? Conduct analysis and assessments ongoing of the assets that we've identified in that very first bubble. And finally, continually develop mitigation strategies, put them into place, and then make sure that they're actually operating effectively. So all of these things work together in this model. What I love about it is that it begins and ends with the business. The business is responsible for its goals, objectives, and success. And more importantly, we support that by identifying risks and letting the business make the business decision. It's not our job to accept risk on behalf of the organization. I am the last guy you want to accept risk. Had I been the one who was providing or accepting risks when I was working at the province, they never would have had iPhones or iPads, ever. You're going to get a notepad, but it's a piece of paper and a crayon, and I want it back at the end of the day. Most security professionals that I know of are risk averse. We are so focused on protecting the assets of our organizations that we don't want risks to impact it. But the problem is, it's the business that runs it. The business pays the bills, sets goals and objectives, and more importantly, it's the business that has to make that decision. So if this entire presentation, the only thing we get out of this is it's the business that has to make the decision, it's upon us to provide the data and provide a presentation that they can understand the risks. And we're going to lead to that now. Let's change. I want to look at a couple of things. I'm going to kill my camera. Just one sec. Perfect. Still good? Hang on, folks. So let's identify the assets and link it to the business goals. What are the potential impacts to the assets that we just looked at? What are the impacts to the business, right? And that means that we need to take time to understand if the business is an online business and providing a service online, if that service is unavailable for any amount of time, what's the impact to the business, to the brand of the business, to the clients who rely on or require that business to be up and running? Are they going to go find somebody else if your website's down or you can't get to that app? These are things that we as information security professionals need to understand and take into account when we're designing our remediation strategy for the business. But more importantly, when I'm providing that presentation back to the executives. Is there a way that I can actually reduce the risk? And how practical are the options to reduce that risk? No organization in hell is ever going to take a $1 million solution for a $100,000 problem. It's just not going to happen. So from our perspective, particularly now in the economic climate that almost all of us are facing, is that we need to understand this is a practical approach to reducing the risk. Thanks, folks, for letting me know. I'm going to keep going through this session and see if we can get to the end of this. My apologies for the traffic itself and for the network bandwidth issues, so my apologies for that. And finally, who makes this business decision? And have they been involved in the risk assessment process? But more importantly, do we know who we have to provide that decision back to at the end of our assessment process? In that presentation, the person who's going to make this decision, are they sitting there? Are they engaged? And are we speaking to them in a language they understand, which is risk and business? Okay, let's move on. Here's a quick example. So remember we talked about that whole approach where we were dealing with a voice over IP issue, that it was, holy smokes, it's really bad. We had this massive technical presentation, and then everyone went to sleep. All right, so let's step back and take a better look at this. Let's go over this issue from what we did in our approach. So we did understand that there was this massive vulnerability and we had to get rid of the problem. We were really concerned and upset about it. When we were writing our report, it was a huge, this was a massive technical report. But at the very beginning of it, we took one page and we created this pager that was going to be the premise and the basis for presentations to the board of directors. And it was that if you continue down the path with the current structure, the potential for having these conversations intercepted is not only likely. The question is, how much damage to the reputation and brand do you wish to? That's all we had for the first paragraph. We submitted the report, the presentation. It took all of about 30 seconds for the first phone call to come in from headquarters asking, Tim, I don't understand. This is really bad. How are we going to fix this? Well, I mean, here's the example that we have, and here's how we can fix it. And no, we can't do that. Okay, thanks. And I kept waiting for the next phone call, Throughout the day, I must have had about a dozen phone calls. One I got was really interesting. It was from our chief security officer, and they were wondering if we would be willing to change the presentation itself and change the structure of the report to soften the edge of the recommendation. No, I wasn't, and nor was my team. So that led to a phone call from the CEO's office letting me know that there will be an airplane ticket in your email. We require you to fly out to headquarters tomorrow morning. Awesome. So on that note, I got packed up all my stuff from the office because I figured, well, I'm going to get fired for this one. So I even brought my badge, brought my laptop, everything, and I waited for that flight out to headquarters. That was an ugly day. But here's what I had done. I had taken the time to understand the technical vulnerability, and it appalled me, right? My team had done such an amazing job technically to show me what the problem was. So what I then did was I stitched together from the technical to the business, and opportunity for the business to understand your goal and objective of growing in this marketplace, building out this technology and acquiring new customers is now at risk. Not only at risk, if it's realized, you will lose market share, and the embarrassment to your brand will probably be to the point where you're going to have to back out of the market. So that's what we had designed and developed. And it was all objective. It was based on the data that we had accumulated. And we knew that with the penetration of the market that these folks wanted to get to, this was the issue that we're going to have to face. So loaded up myself, got ready for the flight over there. And because it was so last minute, I got to go first class, which was terrific. The problem is that, yeah, you're not going to drink on the plane early in the morning flying out east because you've got a presentation to give. So I get to headquarters, I get ushered in to see the CEO. I walked through my presentation, and I remember him. I just, two things: great presentation, thanks for this. You really made it clear. I understand our path. I also needed to look at you and just see if you were actually, if you were going to stick behind your report. I said, yeah, absolutely. And I said, what's this going to cost me? He said, nothing. Can you go back and fix it? Awesome, thank you. And that was it. I put my badge back in my pocket, got the hell out of the building as quick as I could, got to the airport, and because, again, it was a first-class ticket, sat in the lounge and congratulated myself regularly for the great presentation I did, and then determined that, yeah, that congratulations ceremony is going to carry on the first class on the plane on the way home. So I think my head was killing me the next. What that really cemented for me was the approach that you need to be objective in your review. You need to take away the technical jargon and the technical components of your risk assessment and translate those into the business impact, right? So that's what was really successful in this one particular instance, was the idea that the business, although it was a very technical problem that we had identified, and the vulnerability was one that could truly cripple this platform, it had to become something from a business perspective. And that was the issue that saved us. Is we took away those components that were truly technical. We had them in our back pocket, and you always need to keep them. It shows that you have demonstrated and done your homework. It provides the recognition that your team, from a technical perspective, have done the work. But what it does for you as that security professional stepping into the business realm, now I have the opportunity to speak to business terms. Had we gone with a full and complete technical presentation to the CEO and potentially the board members, we would have saw exactly what we had on the presentation. A bunch of people falling asleep because they don't give a damn. Technology and the technical components of a risk, executives don't care about, right? I've held executive positions as a security professional in a number of organizations. And I love, don't get me wrong, I love the dedication and the emphasis people have on the technical problems, the issues that they're finding, more importantly, the vulnerabilities they've discovered, and how bad this is within the organization. I absolutely agree. I love seeing that kind of passion. I appreciate the skill and just the tenacity of the people that have worked for me and work for me today. These folks are just wicked smart folks, and I rely on all of them to come up with those technical vulnerabilities or tell me really where the problem is. But I can't take that into a boardroom. I can't take that in front of a group of executives. And if you as a security professional with a technical component to your position or a requirement to conduct technical reviews and provide that detail upward, if you come in with that technical report, you're going to get exactly the response that I've had in my past lives. The executive's eyes cloud over. We used to call it, and this is, I'm going to date myself, we used to call it the BlackBerry prayer. I had about 30 seconds to get the attention of executives. I had about 2 minutes to keep it, But as soon as I saw that first executive duck down into his lap and look at his BlackBerry, I was buggered. That was it. I lost their attention span because if it was too technical a presentation, it wasn't linking back to business objectives, and it didn't identify the risk, I lost the audience. I don't know if you folks see this, but every time I give presentations or every time I talk to executives, that's the first thing I look for. Have I captured their attention by focusing on risk? Have I been able to link what I have found to the business objectives and to let them know that they are at risk if this threat is realized? And here are some opportunities that you need to work on, or I can work with you to reduce that risk, but the decision is entirely yours. So I've also joked, I made these conversations years ago to executives, particularly in the government, but I've done it in other organizations as well. It's a 2 o'clock in the morning phone call. After providing the risk assessment and the process that we went through and linking it back to business terms, if the organization decides they still want to move forward with the path that they're going to take that could still put us into a risk, terrific, we're with you. We'll stand behind you, we'll respond to the instance, but understand at 2 in the morning, you are the guy. And that means when shit happens and this thing goes, because it probably will, you will be the one who takes that very first phone call. I will be the guy standing beside you. Similarly to what you see in the US with those congressional hearings, I'm going to lean in and tell you to shut up because you don't want to answer that question. But you are the guy in front of the cameras, and understand what that means. Because from a business perspective, you own the risk. Not me, you. And if I've done my job well, provided you the data that you need and the business rationale for reducing the risk, and you still either want to or need to move forward with the activity that's causing the risk, terrific. Awesome. You can run down your hand. I'm going to be behind you with a first aid kit, not beside you, behind you. Because our job then is to play clean. We will continually monitor the environment. We're going to look for cracks in our defenses. We're going to respond as quickly as we can to detect, identify, eradicate, and remove the threat, and then move on and get back into current or normal operating state. But if you've made that decision, my job now is to document that decision, identify who from the executive approved the risk, store it in my risk assessment vault with my ongoing risk register, and then make sure that as I get through it and something does happen, I go back, realize, oh yeah, Bob's the guy who has to answer to the press, or Bob's the guy who's going to make the response. Yep, Bob, this is yours, off you go. And when I say that to executives, think that I'm kidding. No, not at all, because I've done that in my life. I operate as if I don't need the job, and that gives me a bit of clarity. My perspective that as a security professional, when I'm briefed, I focus on the business risk and let them make the business decision. And that's because when we go back to the content of that technical presentation, if all you bring forward is that truly deep understanding of the technical problem and how you found it, validated it, how it matched up to the CVEs, etc., they don't see that. That's not something they care about. Now, let's say within that server or within that application, I found a massive vulnerability, and we knew that it's only a matter of time before that while out in the wild becomes not only a 0-day, but an exploit that's going to impact us. My goal information, I need to understand what business units require that server, that application to be up and running. What's the impact of that today, tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now? What happens if the data in that application is gone, obfuscated, deleted, ransomed, altered? What's the impact to my clients, my customers, my citizens, my employees? I'm going to put those all into business terms. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the executives understand that in your realm as the business owner or business leader, this application is important to you. Here's the risk. If this threat is realized and this risk actually becomes to deal with, here's to your clients, the employees, the data we maintain, the reputation of the organization. We have some opportunities to reduce it. It could be patching, swapping out old technology, putting in different layers of controls, additional monitoring, or retiring the program. The last option could be, you know what? We don't have any money. We don't have any opportunities to replace. We haven't got the time cycles, Tim. We got to keep moving. Those are good answers to the question, what do you want to do? But understand at 2 in the morning, you're the guy. And when you have those conversations with people, be clear focus. All right. Let's kick this to questions and see if anybody has any questions that I haven't caught in the chat. Any other questions, folks, or anything else I've missed so far? So Brett asked the question, do I ever struggle with situations where the impact may be massive, but the likelihood or intent to cause the impact could be quite low? Yeah, but you still know that you should have some transparency. Yeah, absolutely. Pretty much every risk assessment I've done or worked with my teams in the last 10 years, we always find those, those potential black swans, right? If this thing ever happened, mother of God, we're taking out the company. But the opportunity for it to occur is really low. We still have to present it, right? It still has to be presented to the individual organization members. It still has to be presented to the executives or the business leaders. And there's a couple of reasons why. One, as security professionals, it's upon us to be diligent in our work, open and transparent in the approach that we take. If we've identified something that is that potential black swan that could wipe out the entire organization, but that likelihood of it occurring is really small, we still have to express that. We still have to provide that as a risk. And we still have to look at what are the opportunities to at least look at a reaction or response to it. Is there something we can do to reduce the impact of that with our organization? So yeah, Brett, you still have to go through that process. It's more of a theoretical exercise in some cases, absolutely. But that discussion, that whole bringing forward a very technical approach in a business aspect and talking about something that if it does occur could be really bad, but the likelihood is really small, it still gives you, the security professional, an opportunity to talk about that issue and go through the whole cycle that we just did with the enterprise security risk management. Nick asked the question, do I have a preferred method for quantifying risk, or has a quality assessment often been sufficient? Yeah, I mean, so the quality assessment does work. What I like is standardization or consistent approach to conducting the risk assessment. So from a quantifying risk perspective, I will look at data points that we have, but I'm also following standardized structures like the ISO 31000 framework, 31010 for conducting the risk assessment, and then presenting back the data. Remember, we talked about this practical and pragmatic approach. In my world, if the threat has no impact to my organization and I don't have any resources that can be impacted, I'm not going to include those factors inside my risk assessment. So I need to be very mindful of understanding all of the assets in my organization and then applying standardized methodologies like ISO 31000 and conducting like the 31010 framework to complete that risk assessment. Let's take a look here. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to ask the moderators, did I miss anything, or have I cut all the sessions, all the questions so far? We only have about 5 minutes left, so. What's my opinion on taking a crown jewel approach perspective to risk assessments? Yeah, I mean, that does work too, Mitchell. I mean, what I look at from my perspective is I try to consider and conduct the risk assessments from a consistent perspective. And don't get me wrong, the crown jewels are always there as well, right? So in every organization, there's about 3 or 4 things that you absolutely have to be successful. And if any one of those fails, is compromised or gone, the impact to the organization is crippling. Yeah, you bet. So that works. What I like to do, though, is when I conduct risk assessments, and my teams do this now, is that we take the same consistent approach across all of our asset base. And there's reasons why you want to do that, is that this way, when you're developing that, it's a standardized approach where I look from one asset class to another, regardless of the criticality of it. We're still going to conduct the risk assessment the same. What's going to change, though, is when we do the presentations to executives and talk about what's the impact to that asset, the higher the criticality of the asset, those are the ones I'm going to want to present first. Those are the ones I'm going to absolutely want to get executives to agree upon a plan and a reduction of risk strategy. Lower criticality assets, those that we consider or we review on a more regular basis, or those that we have vulnerability management programs in place, as an example, those ones I'll deal with the next year. But that first year approach, it's similar to what the crown jewel approach is, but that first year is where I'm going to go with, once I understand the criticality of the asset, and then I get the business leaders to understand what the risks are to that. Merging technical business risk skills to become a great, so that's a hard one. I made a conscious decision years ago in my career that I have some just wizards on my crew right now here in the city and other organizations where I've worked at that are so far beyond me technically. I rely on their skills and their knowledge to make me look really good. Seriously. So I made that decision to move away from a technical background to be more managerial. So I focused the last 20 some years of my career on that managerial leadership aspect, always going back to and appreciating every skill set that I've ever seen from the technical side of the house. So what I would do, my recommendation to you folks, if you are looking at heading down that managerial path, is understand what's the skills you're going to bring, and then do an inventory of yourself. Do you like doing presentations? Do you like dealing with executives? Are you okay with hearing no, all right, on a regular basis? Are you okay with having to discuss your point and be objective about it and not take things personally? Because in a managerial role, the thickness of your skin has to increase with every level you go up. So there is a point in time where you cannot take this stuff personally. This is just business, right? So from my perspective, that business skill set, more than anything else, is important in a leadership role and in the security role. Whether you're a CISO or CSO, you need to have that thickness of skin. You need to understand that you're presenting an objective perspective based on the expertise of your team. If the executives want to go down a path that you don't agree to, you have to take that, swallow it, move on, and let them make that decision. These are grown adults. They run a business. They are going to have to make mistakes sometimes too. And it's our job to give them the opportunity to make those mistakes, but to be there when things fail. Just a quick question here. What are important considerations with aligning IT risk with enterprise risk? So the way I look at enterprise security risk management, remember that diagram that we had from ASAS, ESRM is a subset of the overall enterprise risk management program. So everything that we identify and assess with the ESRM framework is really a subset of the enterprise risk management framework and aligns directly with that purpose. So everything we find just falls in as a pillar that supports the overall ERM program. FAIR, yeah, absolutely, Nick. Thanks for that. Yeah, you bet. The FAIR, I like FAIR as well. I've used that over time, and we've incorporated some of those principles when you take a look at what enterprise security risk management is as well, right? So I don't know if I have any other questions, but I know we have just a few more minutes left. So I want to take a quick moment to thank everybody here who attended the session, and thank you so much for living through the few technical difficulties. I'm going to blame the dogs now for being online and taking away some of my bandwidth. Thank you to all of you for attending the session today, for being here throughout it, and for spending time with me this morning.